The late afternoon sun draped long, lazy shadows across the flawless lawns of Cedar Grove, a neighborhood so polished it felt like a postcard. Every hedge was trimmed to perfection, every mailbox painted the exact shade of HOA-approved taupe. The air carried the sharp tang of fresh-cut grass, and conformity wasn't just expected here, right, was the law. At the heart of this suburban kingdom stood the Cedar Grove Homeowners Association, ruled with an iron grip by its most infamous member, Margaret Hensley. With her tightly curled blonde hair and a smile that never reached her eyes, Margaret was a force of nature. Neighbors called her Karen in hushed tones, a nickname earned through years of relentless crusades against anything that dared disrupt her VY shine of perfection. It a slightly askew trash can or a garden gnome she deemed tacky. Margaret didn't just live in Cedar Grove, she policed it. Her voice, sharp and nasal, could be heard barking orders about fence heights or the precise angle of awnings. She thrived on confrontation, her clipboard a scepter, her HOA bylaws a holy text. To her, every minor infraction was a personal affront, and she wielded her authority like a club, scrutinizing paint swatches and lawn care with the intensity of a detective. Most residents bowed to her will, keeping their yards pristine and their mouths shut. It was easier that way. But peace in Cedar Grove was about to unravel, and it started with the arrival of a man who didn't fit Margaret's mold. Sergeant Daniel Brooks was a stranger to this world of petty rules. A decorated Army veteran, he'd seen enough real battles to know a lawn weed wasn't worth a war. He'd lost his left leg below the knee to an IED overseas, and now, with a sleek carbon fiber prosthetic, he moved with a quiet strength, his limp barely noticeable. Daniel bought a modest house on Maple Drive, drawn by the neighborhood's calm and its closeness to the VA hospital. He wanted a quiet life, a place to tinker on his porch, maybe build a ramp to make his days easier. But to Margaret, Daniel's arrival was like a crack in her perfect facade. His house was tidy, but not obsessive. His porch projects drilling here, a whiff of adhesive there were, to her, a rebellion. It started small. Margaret would appear at his fence line, clipboard in hand, pointing out a straight dandelion or a hose not coiled just right. "Mr. Brooks," she'd say, her voice syrupy with fake warmth, "we all have to keep Cedar Grove looking its best, don't we?" Daniel, used to clear orders and honest fights, found her passive-aggressive jabs grating, but tried to play nice. "Yes, ma'am, I'll handle it," he'd say, pulling the weed or rolling the hose. He just wanted to be left alone. But Margaret wasn't the type to let things go. Each concession only fueled her, and soon her complaints grew absurd. The faint sound of him sanding wood for a handrail was excessive noise. The occasional smell of epoxy resin, used to maintain his prosthetic, was a toxic hazard. She claimed VY OLAT rules she seemed to make up on the spot. She sent official letters, typed in cold, formal font, citing vague bylaws about nuisances and threatening fines. One read, "Mr. Brooks, the persistent chemical odors from your property are distressing the community." Daniel's stomach churned. The odor was the adhesive he needed to keep his prosthetic comfortable, a task as vital as breathing. He tried reasoning with her. "Mrs. Hensley," he said one day, keeping his voice steady, "this is for my leg. It's not a hobby. The smell's gone in minutes." Margaret scoffed, arms crossed. "Rules are rules, Mr. Brooks. Maybe take your maintenance elsewhere. This isn't a workshop." Weeks passed, and her obsession grew. She'd park down the street, watching his house like a hawk. She'd stroll by, peering onto his porch, her complaints piling up each more unhinged than the last. Daniel worked inside when he could, but some tasks needed open air. He felt trapped, his quiet haven turning into a battlefield. Then came that sweltering Tuesday afternoon, a day that would burn itself into Cedar Grove's memory. Daniel sat on his porch swing, prosthetic off, carefully applying adhesive to the socket liner. His carbon fiber leg rested against the railing, well within his property. He was focused, unaware of Margaret creeping up like a storm cloud. Suddenly there she was, hands on hips, face twisted with rage. "Mr. Brooks," she shrieked, her voice cutting through the humid air. "That smell again. I can smell it from the street. It's unacceptable. Daniel sighed, exhausted. Mrs. Hensley, I'm almost done. It's for She cut him off, her voice climbing. It violates the rules. I warned you. Before he could move, Margaret stormed onto his porch. Her eyes locked on the prosthetic, gleaming black against the railing. To her, it wasn't a life Flinny, it was the source of her imagined grievance, a symbol of Daniel's defiance. This thing, she spat, pointing at it. It's poisoning the neighborhood. Daniel lurched forward, unsteady without his leg. Mrs. Hensley, get off my porch. That's my leg. But Margaret was past reason, fueled by a toxic mix of arrogance and fury. She grabbed the prosthetic, yanking it free. No, Daniel shouted, stumbling as he tried to reach her. Clutching the leg like a trophy, Margaret marched toward the side of his house, where an HOA-hired landscaping crew had left a wood chipper roaring while they took a break. Mrs. Hensley, stop, Daniel yelled, hopping desperately, his heart pounding. Her face twisted into a chilling smirk as she turned back to him. This nuisance ends now, she screamed over the machine's growl. And then, with a triumphant shove, she fed Daniel's prosthetic leg into the wood chipper's gnashing jaws. The machine groaned, sputtered, and shredded the carbon fiber into a cloud of debris. The grinding roar echoed through the silent neighborhood. Daniel froze, gripping the porch railing, his world tilting. The prosthetic worth tens of thousands, tailored to his body, was gone. But worse was the violation, the deliberate destruction of something so personal. The landscapers gaped, water bottles slipping from their hands. Margaret stood by the chipper, chesty vying, a look of grim Tory on her face. She'd won, or so she thought. She didn't know Daniel had a brother, James Brooks, the Inspector General for the Department of Veterans Affairs. A man who hunted fraud and abuse with a quiet, unrelenting focus. That evening, still reeling, Daniel called James. His voice broke as he recounted Margaret's harassment, the letters, the obsession, and the horrifying moment she turned his leg to dust. James listened, his knuckles white around the phone. This wasn't just a neighborhood spat, it was an attack on a veteran, a desecration of his dignity. Stay put, Dan, James said, his voice low and steely. I'm coming. By nightfall, James was on a plane to Cedar Grove, not just as a brother, but as a federal officer. While his office focused on VA systems, the destruction of a VA-funded prosthetic and the abuse of a veteran opened doors for investigation. He arrived to find Daniel shaken, using old crutches he hadn't needed in years. The landscapers, fearing blame, had bagged the chipper's debris. James photographed the scene, interviewed shaken neighbors, and confirmed Daniel's story. The next morning, in a crisp suit, he walked into the HOA office, where Margaret sat, smugly sorting papers. Good morning, James said, his tone calm but edged. I'm James Brooks, Inspector General for the VA. I believe you know my brother, Sergeant Daniel Brooks. Margaret's smile faltered. An unfortunate incident, she said, while VYing a hand. Rules are rules. James leaned forward. I'm not here about yesterday, Mrs. Hensley. I'm here about your HOA's finances, specifically funds solicited for veterans. Her face paled. She stammered, We don't have veteran funds. Just an HOA. James produced a request for 7 years of financial records, citing potential fraud. Margaret's world began to crack. She'd run the HOA's community chest for years, skimming small donations due la $200 here, due la $500 there meant for local heroes. No one had questioned her vague ledger entries for beautification or supplies. But James brought forensic accountants who tore through the books. They found sloppy records, missing receipts, and a pattern. After veteran-themed fundraisers, cash vanished, often in Margaret's accounts, tied to spa trips and designer bags. Over 7 years, she'd stolen nearly due la $60,000. As the investigation deepened, Cedar Grove buzzed with unease. Margaret's patrols grew frantic, her violation notices desperate. But her allies on the board, smelling legal trouble, abandoned her. Residents, long silenced, shared stories of her tyranny. The accountant's report was damning. Due la $60,000 misappropriated, much of it from veteran donations. James called a final meeting in a federal building. Margaret, pale and flanked by a nervous lawyer, faced him, the board, and the EVY dense charts showing her theft, bank records tying withdrawals to her spending. "This is a mistake," she gasped, but James was unrelenting. "We have proof, Mrs. Hensley. You stole from your community, from veterans." He detailed the fraud, then pivoted to Daniel's leg, tying her financial crimes to her abuse of power. The room was silent. James announced federal charges for wire fraud and embezzlement, state charges for assault and property destruction, and a VA ban barring Margaret from all facilities and benefits. A CIVYL suit would recover the stolen funds, plus penalties. Margaret's empire collapsed. She pled guilty, unable to fight the EVY Denke. A federal judge sentenced her to 3 years in prison. A state judge added probation and a restraining order. Her assets, her pristine home, her SUV, her SAVY Angst were seized to pay Dulon $90,000 in restitution. But James had a VY shown. He funneled the money into a VA fund for prosthetic limbs, helping 50 veterans walk again. News spread, dubbing it the Cedar Grove Restitution Fund, a beacon of hope born from Margaret's cruelty. Daniel, with a new prosthetic, found peace in a changed Cedar Grove. The HOA reformed, neighbors became friends, and the air carried only the scent of grass, not fear. Margaret, released years later, vanished, her name a warning of how arrogance could unravel a life. And in Cedar Grove, as Daniel walked its quiet streets, the sun set on a community healing, its scars fading, its heroes rising 50 steps at a time.